When we talk about sex drying up in long term relationships, we are almost always focusing our attention on what's going on in the bedroom. I mean, that's because we treat sex like a destination. It's this room that you go into at the end of the day, and you hope that when the door closes and the lights go out, that everything that happened before that will just fall away. We act like desire is a light switch, and we spend our days, moving around one another like we're coworkers, navigating logistics and schedules and to-dos and chores and all that stuff. And then at 10 o'clock, we expect to instantly transition from that, practicality to this uninhibited physical connection. And when that transition fails to happen, we assume that the problem is a lack of chemistry or attraction or that the spark is gone. But I think that the reality is a little bit more ordinary than that. Hey, lovers. This is Sex in Real Life. Honest conversations about sex and relationships beyond 40. I'm your host, Stacey Herrera. The quality of what happens inside the bedroom, and I say bedroom, but it could be happening anywhere, but the quality of what happens in the space where you have sex is dictated by everything that happens before. It's determined by the energy that runs between you during regular business hours, when sex is not anywhere on the radar. Desire is not something that can be summoned on command most of the time, especially when you become older. When you're in a more seasoned body, a lot of the time, desire moves from being spontaneous to being responsive. So it's an ongoing way of looking at each other, basically. And in long term relationships, I think that one of the greatest threats to connection isn't lack of affection or time. I think it's the distance, the metaphorical distance that settles between you. And to understand why desire sometimes fades in, marriages or long-term relationships, I think that we need to look at the seemingly conflicting need for comfort and excitement. And we've talked about this before, but we're going to talk about it a different way today. Long-term relationships require a level of stability and predictability and a feeling of safety and security, just so that we can survive our daily life. We want to know that our partner is reliable, that they're going to come home, right? We want to know that, on some level that their behavior is mostly consistent. And to achieve that level of stability, we try to control the surprise events whenever we can. So we build a routine, that makes life manageable, and we just are, trying to stave off uncertainty, right? Yeah. So in minimizing the surprises though, we also eliminate the conditions that desire requires, which is mystery. Desire requires a level of anticipation, right? And in the early part of a relationship, it feels a little more effortless. It feels like natural. You don't know your partner's history. You don't know what they're thinking. You don't know their habits. They are completely separate from you, completely individual, right? You have to discover them. But as the years pass, we don't realize when we stop looking because now we see our partner every day and in the most mundane context. I mean, we see them brushing their teeth and washing dishes and leaving for work and running errands, and so we fall into this delusion that we know everything there is to know about them. And we assume that because we can predict their behavior a lot of the time, that we fully understand who they are. And then we inadvertently replace this beautiful, complex, living, breathing, ever changing human being that we sit across the table for them. We replace them with a construct that we made in our mind, right? We cubbyhole them and reduce them to a set of familiar traits and habits. And this predictability is comforting in a lot of ways because we feel stable. But that can be fatal to desire. You cannot long for something that you believe you already fully understand, right? Let that sit for a minute. This illusion of total knowledge, I'm using air quotes, is the thing that kills the tension between two people. When a relationship shifts into absolute familiarity, the boundaries often dissolve. We share every minor thought, small frustration, logistical details of all the days. And, we cultivate a level of closeness, right? Where transparency is valued above everything else. But we also lose something when you eliminate all separateness. And I'm using that language specifically because we definitely have bought into this idea of becoming one, right? But when you do that, when you eliminate the separateness, you also take away the space where anticipation lives. You cannot experience longing for a partner who is constantly pressed against you, metaphorically or literally. When two people blend into a single entity, metaphorically speaking, there is no longer a distinction between self and other. There is no longer two independent individuals who can reach for each other. There is only comfort and this static, I don't know if connection is the right word, togetherness maybe is better. So, this over familiarity, it shows up in the way that we talk to each other during the day. The vast majority of interactions are just functional, conversations that are logistical. We're so focused on managing, whatever we need to manage to keep our life moving, the financial obligations and vacation schedule and blah, 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 blah. Like, we want to talk about, who's stopping at the store and who's going to pick up the dry cleaning and who's going to be home when the repairman is coming, all of that. But our physical touch can follow that same pattern. It becomes utilitarian. It's a quick kiss on the cheek when you're leaving the house, or, a reassuring pat on your back, or a comforting embrace, or a snuggle on the couch while you're watching a movie. And while those things can be full of warmth and affection, they can also be entirely devoid of tension because they're safe. They signal companionship and care, but they do not usually carry physical intent or curiosity. The mundanity reinforces the reality that you are two people who share life rather than lovers who are choosing to be together. I mean, you cannot spend 14 hours treating your partner like a coworker or a sibling and then expect your body to instantly view them as, a source of intense physical pleasure the moment you get into bed. I mean, the transition is too abrupt for the human body to make. Not most bodies. There are exceptions. There are some people who can compartmentalize so well that this is a non thing, but I'm talking about the rest of us. I'm not very good at compartmentalization, so you might not be either. So when we talk honestly about why we lean so heavily into predictability, you know, The true honest answer is intimacy is inherently unsafe. And when I say intimacy, I'm not talking about sex because it kind of chaps my hide that people use intimacy and sex interchangeable. They're not the same. Anyways, but true intimacy is unsafe. I hear a lot, and you probably have heard it too on these internet streets, that we need to be completely safe at all times. But that's an illusion. Love and intimacy are fundamentally risky. The moment you genuinely look at someone and you show them what you want, who you are handing them the power to reject you, to judge you, and to misunderstand you. And there is no version of vulnerability that comes with a safety guarantee. And because intimacy is risky, we often use predictability as a way to shield us against the vulnerability that intimacy requires. So we make our relationships routine and completely transparent because we are terrified of the vulnerability that is required to love a human being who could change or drop their end of the bargain or leave. So we trade heat and tension for the comfort of a familiar arrangement. We choose to be comfortable because being lovers is a high stakes situation, period, point blank. Sustaining tension over decades requires a deliberate willingness to tolerate that risk. It requires a willingness to maintain a sense of separateness, even while you're sharing a life. It means recognizing that your partner is not an extension of yourself, nor are they a project that you own. Do I need to say that again? Your partner is not an extension of you, and they are not your project. They are a separate, distinct human being with a whole internal life that you don't know anything about, desires and complexities that you may never fully know. And that little shift or big shift, actually, it's a big shift in perception, often happens when we accidentally catch a glimpse of our partner outside of the domestic context. I mean, think about the feeling that happens when you see your partner at a social gathering or when you watch them from across the room while they're deeply engaged in something that has nothing to do with you. Maybe they are, giving a speech at a wedding or, speaking passionately about a topic that they care about or just interacting with a stranger who is responding to them with interest. In those moments, when you are seeing them through a non domestic lens, you are forced to view them not as the person who forgot to take out the trash or the one who, schedules the dentist appointments, but you get to see them as an independent person with their own confidence and agency and allure. You see them through the eyes that the rest of the world sees them, right? And for a brief moment, a gap opens between you because you realize that there are parts of this person that exist independent of their relationship with you. And that gap is where desire lives. The realization that your partner is still a mystery, that they are still capable of surprising you, that their internal world is vast and limitless. That restarts the engine of curiosity. Of course, maintaining this view of your partner will require some tolerance for discomfort. We have to be willing to sit with the reality that we do not own the person sleeping next to us. When we choose absolute certainty and transparency, we are trading our physical vitality for emotional insulation. Oh, that sounds so clinical, but it's accurate. The heat between two people during the day, it doesn't have to look like sending explicit messages, though it could. It also doesn't have to look like performing a caricature of seduction, right? It's really about refusing to let the relationship become entirely transparent. It's, I don't know if I want to say it's holding back a little bit of your own internal world, because I don't think it's about holding back, but it's just recognizing that you don't have to share every little bit of what's going on with you. It's okay for you to maintain, some interests that are just for you. It's okay to allow your partner's space to do the same thing. It's really, introducing a layer of playfulness, maybe a lingering gaze or a touch that lasts a few seconds longer than it needs to. It just reminds you of the physical tension alive between the two of you when you stop trying to maintain the status quo. It means moving away from the lazy assumption that you know everything that your partner thinks, feels, and wants, and approaching them with the same level, of curiosity that you bring to a fascinating stranger. Acknowledging that the person that's sleeping next to you tonight is not the same person you met years ago. They're not even the same person that walked in the door, you know, earlier today. They have evolved, their taste may have shifted, their desire may have changed. So then it's a matter of whether you're willing to look closely enough to see those differences. Every day, you are making a choice about the future of your relationship's intimacy. You make this choice in the kitchen, in the car, in between those conversations. And it's a choice whether to collapse into the comfort of what's familiar or to honor the separateness that allows desire to breathe. So, the bedroom, and again, I'm just saying that wherever you're having sex, is not where intimacy begins. But it is where those choices culminate. So, if you want physical connection that feels alive and unpredictable and real, you have to allow each other the freedom to be separate. Curiosity is not a habit that can be forced when the lights go out. It's a way that you pay attention all the time. Huh. Okay, so that is all I've got. That is the crux of good sex these last 4 episodes. That's basically what I've been trying to say is like this is what good sex looks like. So I hope that you gleaned something. And if this conversation or the conversations we've been having have shifted the way that you perceive the space between you and your partner, consider letting this episode be a starting point for a new way of being. And if you value these conversations, please take a moment to leave a rating or review. It only takes a few seconds, but it does ensure that these conversations and explorations of connection continue to reach people who are navigating these same spaces. And please do share this episode with someone that you think will appreciate it. I do not know what we're talking about next week, but there will be something. Until then, take good care. Ciao.